If you want to watch Hearthstone, no worries. Hop on off. I don't mind. We're going to talk about, if you do stay, we're going to talk about potential nerfs. Cards I think might get nerfed based on the current meta. Because usually we see a balanced patch added to Hearthstone shortly after the expansion releases. Lately, I double checked. It's often been the second Monday after the expansion releases, the past like 3 expansion cycles. So in a week from today, we might have some nerfs, but I wanted to go ahead and talk about potential cards that could be nerfed based on what we've seen so far. Because we kind of had a first wave of the meta that was like all mech mage, and even some mech paladin was up there, and of course quest warrior was the first wave of this Voyage to the Sunken City meta. But now as we look, the meta has moved into ramp druid and demon hunter. Now mech mage has fallen. It was like 56% win rates, right? Now it's down to 51. Still tier 2, still good. Mech paladin has fallen even further. Basically, the meta got faster. It iterated either in one of 2 directions. Ramp druid basically pushed it towards, I'm going to win all the late games and I'm going to swing, or I'm going to go super fast with demon hunter and go under these more mid-rangey decks like mech mage and mech paladin, right? These tend to get strong turn 4, turn 5. They start like, piling on the mecha sharks, doing the cool mech paladin divine shield taunt stuff. This deck is going under them and saying, screw that, I'm going to beat you before that. I'm going to be faster than you. Basically a lot of damage and some fast openers. Strong 1 drops, strong 2 drops, as opposed to strong 3 drops, strong 4 drops. So that's why the meta moved under them. And then Quest Warrior is just really consistent. So even at Diamond through Legends, still holding its rank. Now, Pirate Warrior, of course, is really good at lower ranks, 62%. At high ranks, though, Pirate Warrior falls off super hard, like super hard, tier 3. I still think it'll get nerfed, but keep in mind, a lot of people don't think it should be because they play here, and it looks awful. There's one card currently that shows up in all 3 of these top decks. Naga Demon Hunter, Quest Warrior, and Token Demon Hunter. One card that shows up in all 3 of these, which I want to talk about. Yes, Puffer Fist. You guys got it. Puffer Fist is in all 3 of these decks. Of course, in Pirate Warrior, he's a pirate, and he's kind of like another cannoneer with some attack upside that can either do damage or respond to the board. And in Demon Hunter, you have all these multi-attacks thanks to the new card Multi-Strike, which we're also going to talk about later. It's called Multi-Strike, right? Yeah, Multi-Strike, which allows him to go even harder because you can proc the attack trigger twice and make him do, a consecration basically. Now, he's also being played in other stuff like Rogue with like some poison shenanigans. That's not as concerning in regards to the meta. That's a pretty crazy play, giving him poisonous and like wiping a board. That's awesome, but not super competitive yet. It's really more the, I'm playing this as an aggressive minion. It's got premium stats. It's got an insane effect. It's got really nice synergies for my deck. And that's fueling both of those. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Puffer Fist as a across the board offender here in the top 3 decks were to be nerfed in some way. Perhaps just making him a 3/3 would, make him easier to kill. I think pushing him to 4 mana might be too far. That could kill a card like this. Sometimes, 1 mana is a lot in more aggressive decks. I don't want any deck to totally die. So maybe making him a 3/3 is fine. Do you guys have any other? Only minions is another change. Yeah, that would certainly reduce his face damage output. I was killed at 1 health with this through taunts, and that made me very mad. So yeah, if you only hit my taunt minions instead of my face, that would have been nice. So only minions is definitely a change. After your attacks deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. That could be good. Minions might be the most elegant option. Yeah, typically Blizzard looks for something that's kind of simple. I think they do prefer to change stats or mana costs over card text, because card text might require that they like reprogram the card in some way. Like they have to change how the effect is built, but that's not a particularly complex one. And they certainly have changed card text in the past. Yeah, good point. Yeah, the card text also has to be translated and stuff. I will say this is one they might have that kind of baked, because there's a lot of stuff that's like enemy minions versus enemies, but still might have to go through more approval. So I would expect a stat change for those reasons and more, yeah. All right, so I guess a little bit on theme with this one. I also wanted to talk about this card for Demon Hunter, Multi-Strike. I wasn't expecting this card to be bonkers. I thought it'd be good, but I think it's actually kind of bonkers. It's really good. It's being played in both the token and like Naga/Fel versions of Demon Hunter. because it does great things in both of those decks. Basically, it does like 3 things you want it to do. I guess most obvious is it's a Fel card. So it's great for Jace decks. Any Fel Demon Hunter loves this. It's great for Kurtrus, which is being played in all those decks too, because you have multiple attacks, which buffs your Kurtrus minions faster. So if you play a couple of these in the early game, you can really pump up the rush minions on Kurtrus that are fueled by multiple attacks. And it's got synergies with all of the attack stuff card, like Puffer Fist, but also Battle Worn Vanguard, summoning multiple Fel Wings off of your Vanguard. So basically, if you play Vanguard, you can get 4 1/1s in a Fel Swoop. From Fel Swoop. That should be the name of a card. 1 Fel Swoop. This should be a Fel card. You get 4 Fel Wings off of just one thing here. Not to mention, this can also just hit face. It stacks up, a ton with Jace in particular in that regard, and it can help clear minions in the early game. So it's good in its own right as like this just kind of 2-part hit. Either get some chip damage, clear minion, but then also these additional synergies really blow this card out in regards to what it can do for a single 1-cost card. And we've seen this before with all these cheap buffs for Demon Hunter, right? Like twins. What, you guys, I don't know the name of the card. What's it called? I can't think of it right now. Twin Slice. Same sort of thing as Twin Slice had back in the day, right? Like just too much output sometimes for these really cheap damage cards. They just scale into other things so well. 2-cut. The name of it's 2-cut. So I don't know, how would you change multi-strike? Just +1 attack? I don't think you'd want to make it 2 mana. That might be like that. Doubling the cost is pretty insane. It may not get targeted right. It might just be other things around it that get impacted that reduce its efficacy. But 1 attack is not insane. Kind of keeps it in line with your hero power too, like flavor wise. Like I'm getting to use my hero power twice for 1 mana instead of once. But anyway, I'd say maybe a +1 attack would be my change if they're going to change it. And I should clarify, as I always do for these videos, I'm not necessarily recommending any of these changes. I'm trying to take them one by one and give you my thoughts. I'm just identifying cards that might be problematic based on the sort of things we historically have seen for Blizzard. Based on their win rates, popularity, those sorts of things are usually what determine what's getting nerfed. So I guess the next one everybody talks about. Let's talk about this guy. Mr. Smite. Mr. Smite is, depending on which part of the player base you talk to, one of the most hated cards in Hearthstone right now. And for 2 reasons. Number one is Quest Warrior is very popular and still very good at lower ranks. As we mentioned, it falls off at higher ranks, but for a majority of the player base, Quest Pirate Warrior is the best deck in the game. And Mr. Smite offers a ton of lethality for that deck, particularly now in combination with Nelly, the new Colossal, giving you on occasion a 1 mana Mr. Smite that gives you also some 1 mana pirates to play with it when you discover them for the pirate ship here. So a couple different angles now where Mr. Smite, and also off of Juggernaut, of course. You summon Mr. Smite sometimes off Juggernaut for free in combination with Gore Howls, and that's like 13 damage plus whatever else you have in hand. So it starts to feel like a majority of Hearthstone games end the exact same way with Mr. Smite and his crew hitting you in the face. Now, I don't think Mr. Smite's a particular issue from a power level standpoint. In many cases, you feel like the game is over well before Mr. Smite matters. He's just kind of the final blow. Pirate Warrior, when it's good in those lower ranks environments, is often good because of like the Cannoneers and the lead ups to that. Just the consistency, the minions on board, all of that gets you there. Mr. Smite's just sort of a bonus. But I do think there's something to be said for a card that ends games every single time. And even when I'm playing stuff like we just played a Taunt Death Rattle Druid, Mr. Smite was still the card that ended the game because I randomly generated a Nelly and then Nelly gave me Mr. Smite, and that's how the game ended. Despite playing a 20-minute taunt deck, Mr. Smite still ended the game. And that's kind of that Leroy effect of old, where Leroy was always how games ended and you get kind of sick of Leroy. I think Mr. Smite's had the same sort of effect. So if I were going to change Mr. Smite, I think it would be more from a feel standpoint. Like this game just has so much weight, or this deck card has so much weight and gravity, and like games are just really warped around its existence. It changes entire game plans and strategies. It might be a little too heavy in that regard. So I think perhaps for that reason, Mr. Smite demands a change from a feel standpoint. People are just getting sick of it. Maybe Mr. Smite has charge, but the other pirates have rush. I like the idea that you could maybe split it so that he still has that kind of Leroy effect himself, but is not enabling like crazy burst damage. So maybe charge, your pirates have rush. Battle Cry, that would help from the random summon stuff. Yes, Battle Cry, give your pirates charge. That would help a lot from like off of Juggernaut, for instance. For the rest of the game, your pirates have charge. That's it. Yeah. All right. So some good thoughts in chat. So I actually, well, I'm not gonna talk about that one. Mr. Spite's enough talk about pirates. So next up is sad, but I think it might be time to talk about my buddy Guff. I think Guff might need to be changed. I love Guff. I want Guff so badly to be a card that I play every day, but I don't think a world where Guff is a really good card is good for Hearthstone, probably. I want Guff to be like a tier 3 card, right? Where you get to do goofy things with 20 mana and have these really fun big moments. But when Guff is reliably giving Druid crazy ramp and they're winning a lot, it creates lopsided experience for players. The opponent is like, oh my God, they have 19 mana. It creates this sort of hopelessness, this like overwhelming, just like, oh, how can I ever keep up with this? Especially if they play it early. All of that, I think, is pretty feel bad. If Guff were getting you to 19 mana and you were just playing goofy garbage, people would be in love with it. Like, oh, they have 20 mana, but they can't do anything. The problem is, of course, Druid's really good at doing things with all of that excess mana now. And this data from HS Replay, I think, really showcases this a lot. This is Ramp Druid Mulligan data. Guff has the highest Mulligan win rate in the deck. He's very, very good to keep early because you want to ramp. I don't know if that's healthy for a 5 mana card to have a Mulligan win rate quite that high. Yeah, I don't. Maybe just make Guff like 6 mana, slow him down a little bit, right? Slowing him down a turn or two could make a big difference. Not only does that push him back a turn, but it also makes you commit more in total. You can't weave any other plays in as easily. Maybe that. There's some stuff where you could say empty mana crystals instead of mana crystal. That could also help so that he doesn't fill in the gaps on his mana quite as easily. Again, I think Blizzard would probably default to a mana change over a card text change if they can. I'm going to be sad, though. I love Guff for my meme decks, and that's going to be harder to make a meme deck work if Guff is like 6 mana, right? So I almost wish they'd leave Guff alone and nerf some other part of the Ramp Druid package, right? That's why I was so shocked Nourish came out at 5 mana again. Got buffed back to 5 because it just feels like it really enables this. Might be hard for this deck to work as well if Nourish wasn't at 5. Okay, oh, what other card we did talk about? Actually, Kazakhstan for Ramp Druid. This is also a big pain point for a lot of people, right? Kazakhstan could also get nerfed for Ramp Druid. I'm really torn on Kazakhstan. I've often said this is another one of those cards you don't want to be in a tier 1 deck. I think you want this to be in like a tier 3 deck. I hate the way he does just completely shut out other people's late game strategies. Like treasures just always win in the late game. They're so strong, right? So you can tweak this with the treasure pool, as we've already seen done a little bit with like Locust going away. A lot of people want to change the way he functions so that you have to have dragons or have to have played dragons in order to make him trigger. So like for each dragon you played this game, add a custom treasure to your deck or something, right? Like that sort of thing. Again, I think that's less likely than just changing something behind the scenes or increasing mana cost or whatever. But this is a card that's getting a lot of hate. I will say, like, Druid is already a bit exposed to aggro decks. Like, you know, you can go under Druid and just smork them down before they have time to stabilize. And nerfing Kazakhstan doesn't change that, right? But it does change their, like, late game dominance, which might expose them to another weakness. Like, suddenly other late game decks might be able to compete against them, which would, in effect, lower their win rate. If you change some of those, like if you change Guff, for instance, if you nerf Guff, they're probably still gonna win the late game against control decks. Like nerfing Guff's not gonna help, and they're still gonna be exposed to aggro. So it may not really change anything in essence. If you nerf the ramp, they may kind of land in almost the same spot. Obviously, it'll take small hits here and there, but nerfing Kazakhstan might actually change the outcome a little more readily. Should be a payoff for playing a sweet dragon deck, not a catch-all win condition. I do agree with that sentimentally, yeah. It does feel like he's just a toss him in, and this condition is kind of meaningless, right? This has rarely ever meant anything. I mean, it does, because sometimes you want to play him as soon as you can, and that's how he's being played before, but nowadays he's just sort of almost an Archivist Elysiana times 1,000, right? I'm tired to have to play aggro to answer these kind of decks. Yeah, I agree with you. That's what I'm getting at, right? Like, changing this as opposed to the Guff and that stuff would help in that regard. This would expose it to other kinds of late game decks. Couple more here that I want to talk about before I gotta go, which I gotta go pretty soon, so I need to speed this up. I don't think this needs a nerf anymore. The first few days of the expansion, I thought Mecha Shark was gonna be a really prime nerf target. I'm not sure I buy that anymore. Mech Mage is pretty solidly tier 2 at this stage. Mecha Shark can definitely feel like a crazy card in that world. It does have the highest drawn win rate in the deck. Not a great mulligan win rate necessarily, but highest drawn rate in the deck. So if you were going to nerf something in Mage, I do think Mecha Shark would be the target. Gateway is also like the enabler for it, so they kind of go in tandem in a lot of ways. So you could target either of these, perhaps. Gateway to 4, Shark to 4. There's a few changes you could make, but I don't think it's really necessary. I think this won't remain that frustrating for long. It was frustrating early because it was everywhere. Popularity's reduced, win rates reduced. I think this one will settle in a healthy spot, basically. So I wanted to mention Mecha Shark because it's been brought up a lot, but I don't think it's a target for me. We got to talk about this. Switcheroo has been utilized for two kind of weird, crazy things, of course. In wild format, Switcheroo is utilized with the Darkness and Stone Tusk Boar to blow people up for 40 damage with whatever, Vivid Nightmare or something. What's it called? Or even just a 20-20, you know, early in the game can sometimes still be enough without that. So kind of a weird feel bad lose deck in wild. I don't know if the power level of this is insane in wild, but I think it's competitive and really annoying regardless. And then in standard, Switcheroo has been used with Twin Fin, Fin Twin, and Deathwing to make two 12/12s. I did a video on that deck if you want to check it out. And a lot of people say, yeah, but it's bad. And it's not actually bad. It's not great, but it's tier 2. Switcheroo Priest is tier 2. It wins games enough to climb. A good player who plays it well can actually gain even more than that. A lot of people have hit legend with Switcheroo Priest. It's not really 50-50. It's actually a little higher than 50-50 because you can manipulate it, as you can see by the win rate. And I think good players can make it even better. But regardless, it's really not the win rate that I think this reason this should get changed. I think it's the experience, right? Nobody wants to just lose a coin flip on turn 3. It's actually awful to play because if you do lose the coin flip, you just concede out. And it's awful to win because you don't feel like you've done anything. There were no decisions made. There's no impactful gameplay experience. You just got some 12/12s and you won. And then if you lose, you just lost to some garbage 12/12s on turn 3. Your opponent didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to make any decisions. And if you win against it, like because you had some silences or something or a tech card, that's still just a coin flip. It's like, oh, well, I drew my tech card, so I win. It's just not a fun game. It's just boring. It's stupid. So from a power level standpoint, no, of course, a 50% win rate deck does not need to be nerfed. But from a ruining someone's day standpoint, yeah, I think something has to change. You don't want some guy who plays 3 games a week to get hit for 24/24 in standard on turn 3. He's gonna quit. He's gonna stop playing the game. There's been 20 people who said exactly that on YouTube. Whether they actually quit, who knows? But there are people who will see that and it will be the final straw and they'll go, this game is garbage. God, this is stupid. I'm done. I'm not. They'll just never play the game again. It's like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. This is dumb. So I think you got to change Switcheroo. I don't know how to change it. It's sad because this is a pretty cool card. I like this card if it wasn't being cheesed. Yeah, health has been the most common suggestion I've seen. Draw two ability to swap their health, so you can still create some big health stuff, but you don't necessarily create an instant lethality. You have to have a follow up like Bless or something, which kind of slows it down, delays it a little bit, gives your opponent more time. But it would still play towards Priest. Like, I like having high health things, and Bless would be really cool that way. And would limit Twin Fin, of course, you have 1 minion with you'd have to have 2 blesses to follow up for its win fin, for instance. Might not help wild enough though. Actually, does the health even help wild? Because they have like that reversing thing. I guess it demands that they have more cards. If it swaps health. Yeah, I will say, yeah, Tremendous, that's a good point. It is losing a lot of popularity in wild, or standard. I mean, it's not that popular. I actually think I think we looked at it was about 3 to 5% depending on your rank popularity. I actually think that's too high for something this annoying. It's just so stupid that you don't want 5% of people having to deal with this. The 5% of the people who deal with this are going to be so angry and annoyed. I was scared that after this got discovered on day 1 or 2, I was really scared this was going to be like 20% of the meta and people were just going to cheese this. It did not reach those levels, and it seems to maybe be falling off a little bit, like, because it's just not that interesting. It's so boring to play. If that happens and it continues to decline in popularity, in fact, here we have the popularity for Switcheroo Priest. Basically, when it got discovered, it started at 5%. It's fallen all the way to 1.7. That's probably okay. So maybe for the sake of standard, this will continue to decline. It won't be an issue. For wild, a ban could be the solution then. So, Kael'thas. I think Kael'thas might get changed. Seems like Kael'thas is doing crazy things in wild. I looked up some deck win rates. I haven't experienced this because I haven't played wild since the expansion came out. But definitely were some high win rate Kael'thas decks. They weren't like the highest win rate, but there were some high ones. And I don't know, wild's in an uproar. I mean, I see so many people talking about this. Yeah, turn 2 kills. I think turn 1 kills are possible. That all sounds very frustrating and awful. So I suspect we might see Kael'thas push back to 1, I guess. Is that a good enough fix? It seems like 1 was fine before. So yeah, that would be my final nerf. So I gotta go here in a minute, but are there any other cards you guys wanted to talk about you think deserve nerfs or should be nerfed? Or Swordfish brought up. I mean, this card's really strong, but I don't think Rogue is really looking too scary at the moment. When we look at the meta, Pirate Rogue is pretty safely tier 2 in a healthy spot. So although this card seems like a power outlier to some extent in that deck because it's so strong, I don't think the deck warrants a nerf at this stage. Maybe in a future expansion, if they get even more support and that gets refined, this would be the first target. But at the moment, it's at about a 50, just under 51%. So I wouldn't complain. I wouldn't change Cariel. I think Cariel's fine. Cariel gives aggro decks plenty of time to go under her. Like, they have time to kill you by the time Cariel comes down, and then Cariel presents an alternate win condition, which I love. I'm glad that it's an actual like defensive win condition. Like, you can't kill me now. The game is over. I do still find Free Shaman annoying. I still hate Snowfall Guardian, dude. Deck's not too strong at the moment though, so it's just annoying. I don't think it's like a change for now. Quest Hunter is again solidly tier 2, 51% right now. Don't think it'll be a target. Zyrella changed to death totals that have activated. Okay. Yeah, again, Zyrella right now is actually pretty low win rate. That Shellfish Priest is 43% overall. I don't think that'll get a change. I do like that a lot of you are just mentioning things you hate, though. I'm on board. There's a lot of cards I have like a pocket hatred for that I love getting nerfed, even if they don't necessarily deserve it for win rate. If I could pick a hate list, a hit list of cards to nerf, man, and Blizzard listen, that would be beautiful. Thanks for hanging out, by the way. So many of you watching for just like a chat. That's awesome.